the world. They care about climate action. They care about their fellow citizens. They care about all of those things.
What if I told you that everything you were promised, lower costs, more jobs, a stronger Canada, was not just a broken promise, but a deliberate illusion? Because today we have the receipts. And in the next several minutes, I'm going to walk you through the cold, hard data that Canada's mainstream media refuses to put together in one place. We're talking about unemployment numbers that shocked even the analysts who predicted them. We're talking about a prime minister whose closest globalist ally is about to lose his job. And we're talking about why, after 11 years, Canada's economy is not just stagnating, it is actively falling apart. Stay with me. Because this is not a conspiracy theory, this is math. Let's start with the numbers that dropped just recently and sent shockwaves through Bay Street. Canada's unemployment rate has now risen to a 6-month high. And it's not just a blip. In April alone, Canada lost a net 17,700 jobs. And if you zoom out, in just the first 4 months of this year, the Canadian economy has shed a total of 112,000 jobs. 112,000 jobs gone in 4 months. And here's the part that the Carney government does not want you focusing on. The demographic that took the hardest hit was youth aged 15 to 24 and men aged 25 to 54. These are not abstract statistics. These are young people who cannot afford rent. These are working age men who are the backbone of every trade, every resource project, every small business in this country. Analysts didn't even see this coming. They had predicted job gains. Instead, we got the opposite. And economists are now warning this is not temporary. This is the beginning of a sustained economic downturn. Now think about this. Mark Carney won the last election largely on the strength of his economic brand. His entire pitch to Canadians was, I am the smartest guy in the room when it comes to money. Trust me. He was the former governor of the Bank of Canada, the former governor of the Bank of England. His resume is immaculate on paper. But the economy doesn't care about your resume. It cares about your policies. And right now, the policies are failing. Here is something that almost nobody in legacy media connects. And I think it is one of the most important economic stories of our generation. Canada's oil sands are producing at a record high, over 5 million barrels per day, up from 3 million a decade ago. That sounds incredible, right? That sounds like success. So then why has $1 trillion in capital left Canada over the last 11 years? Why in 2025 did the United States sanction $56 billion in LNG-related projects, while Canada sanctioned zero in the same period? Let me give you a real-world comparison that makes this concrete. Mexico's Southeast Gateway Pipeline, a 700-kilometer subsea pipeline, began construction 8 months after filing permits. It was in service in under 3 years. In Mexico, a developing nation that moved faster on energy infrastructure than Canada. Meanwhile, we have Bill C-69, a piece of legislation that was supposed to streamline environmental reviews, but instead became what critics call the No More Pipelines bill. It has created years-long approval processes, it has suffocated investment confidence, and it has sent billions of dollars south of the border to Texas, where companies say the regulatory environment is simply better. And now, a year after Mark Carney promised Canadians he would fix this, promised that projects would be approved at speeds never before seen in generations, his government is only now saying they will suggest bringing in the policy frameworks to make Canada competitive. 1 year later, suggestions, frameworks. Meanwhile, Continental Resources has added rigs in East Texas specifically to capitalize on capital that left Canada. That is not leadership. That is managed decline. Now, here's where things get very, very interesting. And I want you to pay close attention because what is happening in the United Kingdom right now is a mirror of what is happening in Canada. Mark Carney's close friend and ideological ally, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, is facing massive calls to resign. In the May 2026 local elections, the Labour Party lost over 1,400 council seats and lost half the seats they were defending. Over 60 Labour MPs have reportedly called for Starmer to step down. Now, why does this matter to Canadians? Because the policy playbook is identical. Starmer's government pursued aggressive green energy mandates that drove up energy costs. He maintained open immigration policies that overwhelmed housing and public services. He raised taxes while cutting welfare. And he spent more time positioning the UK against Donald Trump and the United States on the global stage than he did fixing the cost of living for British families. Does that sound familiar? And here is the part that The Economist, not a right-wing publication, openly documented. UK economic optimism hit historic lows, worse than previous crises. Housing construction in England dropped to a 10-year low by late 2025. Productivity growth remained anemic. Living costs stayed high. The Conservatives in the UK are now describing Starmer's legacy as no growth, higher taxes, and record unemployment. Sound familiar? It should, because we have been living our own version of this story for 11 years. Now, here is the moment that made my jaw drop. And I genuinely want you to think about what this means. For months, in fact, for over a year, Mark Carney has been telling Canadians that our reliance on the United States is a weakness. He said our ties to the U.S. were a vulnerability. He said the future would be rebuilt through Europe. He told Canadians we should be aligning ourselves with the EU. He pushed Canada toward China, to the point that American Democratic governors started sounding the alarm about Canadian policy being a national security risk. Let me repeat that. Democrats in the United States warning about Canada's China policy. One American governor specifically called out Chinese BYD vehicles, cars with full 3D mapping, video surveillance, and geolocation data packages that transmit back to Beijing, and described them as a national security risk, not just an economic risk, a security risk. And yet the Carney government was positioning this as part of a diversification strategy. And then, almost overnight, Mark Carney pivoted. He stood at a podium and said, and I'm paraphrasing here, Canada remains open to deeper integration, including options for Fortress North America in selected sectors. Those offers are on the table. I'm sorry, what? A few weeks ago, you said the opposite. You spent a year telling Canadians that American integration was our weakness. You built an entire political identity around Canadian independence from the United States. And now, coincidentally, right as your globalist counterpart Keir Starmer is being pushed out of office, you suddenly discover that actually, yes, deep integration with America is in Canada's best interest. This is not a policy evolution. This is a man reading the political winds and hoping Canadians don't remember what he said last month. I want to take a step back here and ask a question that I think is genuinely at the root of why this keeps happening election after election. What does freedom mean to you? Because I think the honest answer for most Canadians is, I have a car, I have a job, I can pay my bills. And that definition of freedom, surface-level, consumption-based freedom, is exactly why governments that expand dependency keep getting reelected. Here's the deeper question nobody wants to ask. Why do you need the 10-a-day childcare? Why do you need the National School Food Program? Not whether those programs are kind or compassionate, maybe they are. But why, in one of the wealthiest nations on earth, does a full-time working Canadian need a government subsidy to feed their kids at school? The answer is inflation. The answer is a tax burden that has eroded purchasing power over a decade. The answer is a regulatory environment that suppressed wages and economic growth. The answer is that the same government that created the conditions requiring those programs is the one handing them out and being cheered for it. That is not compassion. That is a dependency loop, and it is by design. When you vote for a government that gouges you with taxes, inflates your cost of living, kills job-creating investment, and then hands you programs to cope with the damage they created, you are not being helped. You are being managed. And the data now backs this up completely. $1 trillion in capital has left this country. Youth unemployment is at generational highs. Housing starts are collapsing. And a prime minister whose entire brand is economic credibility is presiding over 112,000 job losses in 4 months. What we may actually be witnessing right now is something historically significant. We may be watching the ideological collapse of the progressive globalist governing class in real time. In the UK, Keir Starmer's coalition is fracturing. His own MPs are abandoning him. In Canada, even the press gallery, which spent years cheerleading for Trudeau-era policies, is beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about the gap between Carney's rhetoric and his results. And the reason this is happening now is simple. Reality caught up faster than they expected. The promise was always, trust us, the short-term pain will lead to long-term gain. The green transition will create jobs. The diversity programs will strengthen institutions. The immigration surge will grow the economy. The regulatory frameworks will be replaced by better ones that still protect the environment but enable development. None of it worked. And now the bills are coming due. When the UK Conservative Party describes Starmer's tenure as no growth, higher taxes, record unemployment, and when Statistics Canada data confirms that Canada is experiencing the same trifecta, that is not partisan talking points. That is a shared policy failure playing out across multiple Western nations simultaneously. And it is being driven by the same network of advisors, the same consulting firms, the same international institutions, and the same ideological commitments to climate policy, open borders, and managed globalization that prioritizes multinational capital flows over working families. The only question that remains is, will Canadians connect the dots before the next election, or will we wait for the numbers to get even worse? Look, I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to make sure you have the information that allows you to think clearly. The unemployment numbers are real. The capital flight is real. The $1 trillion that left is real. Keir Starmer's collapsing government is real. And Mark Carney's sudden pivot on American integration after a year of the opposite is real. What you do with that information is up to you. If this video gave you something to think about, please share it. Not for the algorithm, though that helps, but because this conversation needs to happen in every Canadian household right now. I'll see you in the next one.